Louisiana Eats is brought to you with major support from Zatarain's, a New Orleans tradition since 1889. Broadcasting from WWNO New Orleans and our studios in the Southern Food and Beverage Museum, this is Louisiana Eats. I'm Poppy Tooker. We've got big news for our Louisiana Eats listeners. Through a collaboration with the Southern Food and Beverage Museum, our Louisiana Eats studio has found a new home. SoFAB, as it's affectionately called, is a nonprofit living history organization dedicated to the discovery, understanding, and celebration of the food, drink, and related culture of the South. Based in New Orleans, SoFAB examines and celebrates all the cultures that come together to create the South's unique culinary heritage, bringing all races and ethnicities to the table to tell the tale, from the farmer and the homemaker to the line cook and the celebrity chef. Exactly what we strive to do every week on Louisiana Eats. To make you feel at home in our new home, SoFAB's founder, Liz Williams, gives us a private tour of the museum's exhibits. Then, Jill Benson, who makes magic in the Rouse's Culinary Innovation Center, gives us a peek at the 1,300 square foot state-of-the-art kitchen just steps away from the Louisiana Eats studio doors. And SoFAB board members Ann Babin and John Lala share their story as third-generation proprietors of Natco, a 90-year-old national meat and provision company that began right here in Louisiana. There's so much to learn that we can hardly fit it all into the next hour, but we're going to try. So grab that box over there and help us move into our new Louisiana Eats studios right here in the Southern Food and Beverage Museum. SoFAB's founder, Liz Williams, interrupted our move to give us a special tour of the museum's exhibits.
I'm Liz Williams, and I'm the president of the Southern Food and Beverage Museum. The Southern Food and Beverage Museum is here in New Orleans because New Orleans is the most important food town in the United States, but also because we're the center of a real cuisine, and I think that's very important. Also, we are a place that can see the rest of the South because of our location. So it's easy for us to talk about corn, talk about sugar, talk about peanuts, and all the things that people all over the South eat and do.
Liz, one of the most amazing things to me about this project is how long it's been in the making. Now we're here on this prized corner of Aretha Castle Haley and Martin Luther King. How did you get this idea? And tell me the trip that you have been on to get us to this corner.
Well, I think that when I learned about how to put together museums, just from the experience at the University of New Orleans, through the Ogden Museum and through what was then the D-Day Museum, I realized how much I really liked this. And my whole life, I've been very interested in the intersection of food and culture. And so it became a way to put these two things together. Even when I first started out in my career, I was a lawyer, I lived in Europe, I explored Europe by eating. And I think a lot of us do that. And so that's been something really important all the time. And so to be able to combine that with putting together a museum and creating an organization that can carry on is something that was really something I wanted to do.
Well, I want all my Louisiana Eats listeners to have the opportunity to take a virtual tour of the Southern Food and Beverage Museum. So would you please lead the tour?
Be happy to. So first, one of the things I want to talk about is this wonderful Natco shadow box, which is really a history of all of the tools necessary in early butchery. And it's very exciting to see. It's also fantastically gory looking.
It's kind of scary. I don't even know how big that big butcher's cleaver is, but it appears to be over a yard long to me.
Yeah, I mean, these things are really serious. But when you think about what being a butcher is and what that means, you need tools of this size because the animals are really quite large. We're very, very fortunate that this and so many things have been donated to us.
Explain to me, who are the gentlemen, who are the butchers? Are those members of the Natco family?
Those are the Lalas. That's Nicholas Lala up there, and there he is over there in that portrait. That actually was in their earliest place, which is in this neighborhood, not far from here.
So you have any idea what were some of the uses, like that very scary scoop thing? What's up with that?
Well, that would be something that would allow you to get things out of the inside of bones.
Ah, marrow.
Marrow, or perhaps use it inside of the brain or something like that. So that the scoop allowed you to scrape things out.
And this beautiful table, I'm always so entranced when I see one of these butcher's blocks that, you know, you can tell have had years and years and years of cutting on them. Does this belong to the Lala family too?
This belonged to them also, yes. And you can tell how things would be laid out based on where, you know, and whether someone's right-handed or left-handed, all of those things based on the depressions in the top.
It's beautiful. So where are we going to go next, Liz?
Okay, so the next place we're going to go is the absinthe exhibit.
Because aside from being just the Southern Food and Beverage Museum, this is also the Museum of the American Cocktail.
That's right. And we can see as we walk down here a lot of exhibits that are cocktail related. And we have, besides the Sazerac, some other important cocktails like the Crusta and the Ramos Gin Fizz and other things that were really important to New Orleans and made us really a kind of keeper of the flame of the cocktail over many, many years. Also, we were the first place to commercially manufacture ice, and that also contributed to us having a big cocktail culture.
This appears to be an apothecary shop.
Well, this is a kind of representation of the old Absinthe House bar around 1890, 1892, something like that. But the old apothecary shop is exactly what it came from. And so that's why it actually looks like that still. And it's only in more modern times that you had a bar that looks like with stools and all of that sort of thing. But we've done it even with the sawdust on the floor and all those things.
The spittoon and everything.
That's right.
Now, are all of the bottles at the bar all different kinds of absinthe?
All different kinds of absinthe. And some of them are not being manufactured anymore because they've gone out of business because there was that big flurry of new absinthe companies right after the ban was lifted. One of the reasons why we have this here is because it really is a representation of the fact that New Orleans was the center of absinthe drinking in the United States. And that was partially because of our close ties to Paris. But there were actually places that opened in New York that said, we drink absinthe here the way they do in New Orleans.
Oh.
So it was really important here, much more than we think of today. But at one time, drinking absinthe in New Orleans was almost a way to say, we're still French.
That's grand. One of the fascinating things to me is that even though we are in New Orleans with this incredible Louisiana culinary culture, you have ensured that the whole South is really represented here. So what are some of the other states, and tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we have all the states of the South, 15 states, and we also cover the District of Columbia because a little bit of Maryland and a little bit of Virginia went together to form the District of Columbia. And since Virginia and Maryland are southern states, we include Washington, D.C., and also we cover the Gulf of Mexico. But right now we're standing under the sign of Florida. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is our mullet smoker.
Yes, that's pretty interesting.
And it's really a mullet smoker. It's not just a representation of a mullet smoker. And if you smell it,
I can smell the smoke from here.
It smells like mullet. And I just love the idea that everything here does smell. It just makes it real, you know?
It absolutely does, because this is also the museum where you're allowed to eat and drink.
That's right. That's right. You can't be afraid of food and drink if you're a food and beverage museum. So we encourage people to get a drink, to eat, walk around. Nobody stops you at the door and says, get rid of your water or anything like that. Another thing that's kind of fun is if you stand over here, you can see the barrel that stands in Kentucky.
Yes.
But you can also see the barrel in Louisiana. So that Louisiana barrel holds Tabasco, and that holds whiskey. It holds bourbon. And so you can see that the old bourbon barrel comes to Louisiana, is emptied of its bourbon, and becomes a place to age Tabasco. I just think that's really a great little story.
It is a wonderful story.
And you can see it in action by being here. So it's not just something to read about. To me, that's one of the best things about the museum, is that you get to see things.
If you had to say the rarest, the most special thing that you find here in the museum, what might it be?
Well, of course, some of that depends on what
your perspective.
Right,
it's all
exactly.
perspective.
I mean, everything from those old chicory containers there, which I think are just beautiful, and chicory doesn't come in anything that beautiful anymore.
No.
To the bar from Bruning's restaurant, which I think is really fabulous.
Let's talk about the bar from Bruning's restaurant, because I am so personally thrilled that you have been able to save that incredible piece.
Well, the story is amazing, because the bar was actually first in the West End Hotel before it was in Bruning's. So Bruning's opened in 1859. And in the 1860s, when there was a renovation of the West End Hotel, they bought one of the double bars. There were two of them, side by side, in the lobby of the West End Hotel. So it went into Bruning's. It stayed there until 1998, when Hurricane Georges made the building too rickety to survive. The family had already bought another building, which was waterside, but this bar didn't fit in it because the bar was too tall. So fortunately, they put it into storage. They didn't cut it down the way people sometimes do. But after Hurricane Katrina, the storm surge took Bruning's, but not the bar, because the bar was in storage. And even though the bar went underwater from rising water, it was still there. And so when they decided not to reopen, they gave it to us. It was 176 pieces, and we put it back together.
It is beautiful, and honestly, I have to say, it's a living treasure here at the Southern Food and Beverage Museum, because after all, you see a bar, it's in a museum, but maybe you just want to go up to the bar and order a drink, and you can get a cocktail right there at the bar at Bruning's in the Southern Food and Beverage Museum at Perlou now, huh?
That's right. It's really fun to put it back into service, yes.
Well, Liz, I just want to thank you so much for taking us all on a tour of your wonderful, wonderful new Southern Food and Beverage Museum and its new permanent home. And I also want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for welcoming us into the Southern Food and Beverage Museum, because Louisiana Eats is really happy to have a home here with you. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you for coming, and I think we're going to have a long relationship. It'll be great fun.
Stay tuned.
Yes.
Thanks. Liz Williams, founder of the Southern Food and Beverage Museum. As the Louisiana Eats studio build-out continued, we were distracted by the scent of something delicious coming from the Rouse's Culinary Innovation Center, located just adjacent to our studio. I popped my head around the corner, and there was our friend Jill Benson stirring up something in the kitchen there. Jill, it's you in the kitchen making this delicious smell. What is that you're cooking in the pot?
Poppy, it's Monday. We're cooking red beans and rice.
Of course it is. So,
Of course it is. What are you thinking?
well, I'm glad I know what's for lunch on Mondays at SoFAB. So tell me, what are your fantastic, exciting plans for this space? Because this is about the most beautiful kitchen I've ever seen, and I can tell you, I'm making some plans in this kitchen, me.
Poppy, isn't this just the coolest space? We have, I think you already mentioned, I'm going to say it again, we have a 1,300 square foot space. We're right here at the corner of O.C. Haley and MLK in Central City in New Orleans. We have this gleaming river of stainless steel appliances, all state-of-the-art, provided to us by Genair.
Oh, gosh, they're so beautiful.
What's so cool is Genair came to visit us a couple of weeks ago to see what we had done with their generous donation of appliances, and they were so excited that they've been asking us about what to do with the outdoor kitchen, but that's down the road, but we're pretty excited about that coming down the pike. But they're sending us the latest and greatest. They had already given us 2 fabulous full-size refrigerators, and then they came out with an obsidian, they call it the obsidian-lined refrigerator. It's lined in black with these spotlights.
Oh, can I look in it?
Yes, please do. It's so, it see how it spotlights everything? It makes your strawberries appear to glow.
I never saw a refrigerator I wanted to do a photo shoot in before.
Well, neither had I, and we thought the refrigerators we had were just perfectly good enough, but no, they decided that only the best would do, and they sent us yet another really cool refrigerator.
That's fabulous.
So enough about our refrigerator. We have induction stoves, we have gas, we have, we have upper and lower ovens, we have a microwave that's also a convection oven, we have warming drawers, we have,
cooling drawers.
We have refrigerator drawers, we have freezer drawers, we have it all. We have the best toys here. And speaking of toys, our other sponsors sent us the best kitchen power toys. We have all kinds of cool stuff from KitchenAid, a big professional 6-quart stand mixer with all the fun attachments to play with. And KitchenAid is sending us some products that they haven't even released yet.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. And do I get to play with them too?
You do. You get to play with these too.
I'm so glad you're my friend.
Not only do you get to play with these, but a big part of what we're doing here in the kitchen is we have a culinary incubator program, and it's for culinary entrepreneurs. So like the guy who has a food truck or the pickle maker at the farmer's market. And they have to, in order to sell their products publicly, they need a commercial licensed space to work out of. So we're licensed, we're a commercial licensed kitchen, we're licensed for commissary, and we can make, based on the grants that we have, we can make this space available to culinary entrepreneurs for $25 an hour.
Oh, that's
Isn't that cool?
Free.
To work with all of this great stuff. And I mean, we have a nonprofit rate, and we have a private rate, and we have a rate for commercial photographers and videographers, and then just people who want to host a party. But we're really proud of being able to, through grants, offer that $25 an hour rate to people who are trying to get their businesses started.
And then,
that's huge for us.
Now that we've got just adjacent to the kitchen, the Louisiana Eats recording studio here, people can come and make radio too.
Absolutely.
If they so desire.
Well, we're going to have beaucoup fun here, Poppy.
I know that. And talk about fun. Where did you get that chandelier?
Oh, the chandelier, isn't that super cool? Okay, our friend, and of course she's your buddy too, Kit Wall, our Renaissance woman. She writes cookbooks. She was a powerhouse culinary publicist. She's an artist. She has an installation that's currently up in the windows at the Ritz-Carlton on Canal Street. Go check that out. But she retired from welding, but she was also a welder, and she welded. Isn't that crazy?
She's the prettiest welder I ever met.
She really is a fabulous welder. So she welded this massive stainless steel chandelier that we have here in the kitchen, and then she had rose tree glass on Algiers Point blow 50 brilliant red Tabasco peppers to hang from the chandelier. So it's super cool, and at night the thing is it sparkles, it's radiant. We're just so excited.
Well, I am excited too. What kind of cookware are we going to cook on in here?
Well, let's see. We have Lodge. Lodge is one of our sponsors, and they have given us lots of carbon steel cookware, enameled cast iron, all that, raw cast iron, all that great stuff that Lodge is known for. We have a bunch of fun microplane toys. We have Wusthof knives, but those stay under lock and key. Those are our private knives. Because the chefs, when they come to work with us, they typically bring their own knives. You have to bring your own knives and your own aprons when you come here. That's about all you need to bring.
Well, I have a great idea, Jill.
Uh-oh.
This space, how many people can you seat in this kitchen?
Well, we can seat 50 comfortably. We can pile them in at 70, and if we really push it and they're all real cozy with one another, we can go to 90.
Well, Jill, what would you think about us starting a regular Louisiana Eats and Cooks Club here for all of our listeners to come and cook with us here in the kitchen too? What do you think?
Do we get to cook?
You and I cook together.
That's
and
awesome.
They can all stir the pots too. How about that?
That's a great idea.
Done.
We can invite other cookbook authors in, traveling chefs. Wait a minute, this is great. We could go crazy with this.
Well, we will go crazy
This
with
is super
this.
stuff.
And for all our Louisiana Eats listeners who want to learn more about the Rouse's Culinary Innovation Center at SoFAB, they can visit our Louisiana Eats website or visit the Southern Food and Beverage Museum website too.
That's southernfood.org.
Thanks, Jill. Jill Benson in the Rouse's Culinary Innovation Center at the Southern Food and Beverage Museum. When we come back from a short break, Ann Babin and John Lala join us with the story of their industrious immigrant grandfather who founded NATCO 90 years ago, armed with nothing but a butcher's knife and a lot of determination. Don't go anywhere. I'm Poppy Tooker, and you're listening to Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Louisiana Eats is brought to you with major support from Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen and Zatarain. Remember when we talked with Liz Williams about the Lala family?
Those are the Lalas. That's Nicholas Lala up there, and there he is over there in that portrait. That actually was in their earliest place, which is in this neighborhood, not far from here.
I was so surprised that food service giant Natco began as a little New Orleans butcher shop. I just had to hear more about this fascinating family. Ann Babin and her brother John Lala sat down with me to tell the story of their third-generation family business.
Wow, that is a fun story to tell. My grandfather came over from Contessa, Antolina, and worked in the French Quarter at the farmer's market. Soon realized did not want to sell produce because a lot of the people that were selling meat got off of work at 12 o'clock. And one of the main reasons they got off of work at 12, all the ice melted. So he thought, you know what, I'm not going to sell produce anymore. I'm going to sell meat.
And what year is this, Annie?
In the 1900s.
Okay, the early 1900s?
That is correct.
So was he working from a butcher's stall?
Yes, when he was in the French Quarter, he would actually process meat. So people would bring him venison, deer, rabbit, and things like that. And then he would actually cut the product and further fabricate it for them. He obviously had his own beef, and he would sell that as well. And that's how he really got started, is more of a butcher, and then as a protein source to kind of help people secure good steaks early on in New Orleans.
People wanted it cut a very particular way, and he was very specific in his cutting. And he started really getting into it and started realizing, hey, you know what? This is something I really want to do. But I want to open up a grocery store. I don't want to just stay in the French Quarter. In 1925 is when the conception of the business began. He opened up a store across from the biggest grocery store in New Orleans. And all of his friends were like, are you crazy? Why would you open up a small butcher shop across from the biggest grocery store? He goes, because there's the most traffic.
That is very smart. And this was on Magazine Street, right?
It was on South Galvez.
Yeah, South Galvez Street.
South Galvez Street. And I can't recollect the actual name, Poppy, of that grocery store, but his biggest success came from so many people went to that grocery store, but went to National Meat for their cuts of meat.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And he took that philosophy, and I know you remember the story with Dad sharing it to us, is that he took that philosophy to his second location on Gania Street to Magazine Street. Because remember, we were on Magazine and Chapatulas, literally 2.5 blocks from Schwegmann's. And we all know Schwegmann's, love the Schwegmann family, great grocery store. And that's where, our original second location was of National Meat and Provisions. And that's where our father spent a lot of his time with his father, cutting meat and servicing the local residents of New Orleans up and down St. Charles Avenue to some of the restaurants at that National Meeting location on Magazine Street.
So he was making deliveries.
Yes, he started making deliveries. He had Commander's Palace. He always tells us was one of his first accounts. Came into the store. They also had a cruise line that had come in. Limousines would all pull up in front of National Meat and Provisions, and he would cut meat for a lot of the wealthy people that lived uptown. So he was a very proud Italian man.
Now, you all are the third generation. So was your grandfather alive when you all were children? Did you know him?
Yes, I knew my grandfather very well. In fact, my grandfather died on my 18th birthday, and back then I used to think it was such a sad day, but then I'm very grateful because I had him for 18 years of my life, and that's a day I'll never forget.
John, what are your memories of your grandfather?
My grandfather was a very strong and self-assured individual. Even at 89 years old, I just looked at him in awe. His hands were like clubs. And if you look at his hands, I never forget when I was a young boy going to visit him with our father and just looking at his hands. And if his hands could tell a story, I think of how many millions of pounds of beef and chicken and veal and lamb passed through his hands and how many people he serviced and really enjoyed it. He always sourced and tried to find the highest quality product and always just looking to do better.
So your father, Leonard, then ends up in the business with your grandfather.
That is correct. And his brother, Dominic.
Yes.
They're in the grocery business for several years. And in 1940, 1945 is when the grocery store closed and the wholesale National Meat and Provisions went live.
Obviously at the time when the grocery store was open, it was my father and Dominic who ran the grocery store. And my mom and dad only had 4 children at that time. One day, someone came in and held my dad up at gunpoint. So he came home that day, told our mother and said, hey, we got held up by gunpoint. Everything's okay. They just stole some money. No big deal. She told him, look, we have 4 kids. I'm not going to be a widower. You need to close the store.
So he did. And I really think Leonard and Dominic took a gamble, selling the grocery store and just keeping the meat department open because they really had to go out in the field and solicit business. Mm-hmm. But they were able to do it because so many uptowners were buying their beef. And when they tell the restaurateurs would want to go to National Meat and Provision and buy their product.
Do either of you have any memories of the grocery?
I have memories of the grocery store, going in as a little girl with my dad on a Sunday. And it was closed on Sunday, but I remember running through and always walking out with tons of candy. I just remember being able to take candy. And I actually missed the grocery store when he closed. I'm thinking, why is he closing this? I mean, this is a gold mine.
That's my endless candy counter.
Absolutely.
That's exactly right. One of my memories of the grocery store is obviously, seeing all the advertisement. And seeing how our father would write on the windows with either soap or shoe polish, 29 cents for chickens and 69 cents for beef back ribs. And it's just those prices, unfortunately for the restaurateurs are long gone. The beef prices have soared. But it's just, for me, you see those prices and it's just like, man.
And your grandfather, had he retired by this point?
He was semi-retired. He was always had his hands in, much like our father. He's been retired from right after Hurricane Katrina hit, but he still comes on board. He's very much involved in NATCO. You know, when it's your passion, I don't think you can ever really shut it down. And I don't think our grandfather did, and I know Leonard hasn't.
Well, one of the interesting things about family businesses, though, is often it can be kind of a tricky dynamic. So, did your father and grandfather ever disagree about how to go about something? Was your grandfather totally on board with the concept of closing the grocery and going wholesale?
I'm sure it was difficult. I'm definitely sure it wasn't something that was very easy for
Well, Ann,
him.
I think Ann's being really kind. I'd love to be a fly on the wall to have two strong Italian men in a room trying to figure out what the next generation's going to do. I remember stories of our father saying that when his father was making Italian sausage, he was trying to streamline the operation and make a recipe that can be duplicated and not just made by Leonard or his father. And he would literally grab his father's hand when he put a handful of pepper or a handful of fennel or anise into the Italian sausage, and they would weigh the ingredients. And he told me stories of how frustrated his father was, but he says, Nicholas, I got to do this. I got to do this because, you know, we have to have consistency. We have to be able to pass this on to the next generation. And I think that's one of the key things is that Ann and I and our family is so blessed because Leonard, our father, has the foresight to let go. And that's the biggest gift that I feel like he's given us is the ability for him to let go and trust us. And when I was working directly for him, I never forget, he went on vacation. Him and my mom went to Europe for 2 weeks. And I said, Dad, who's going to buy beef? And he said, you are. And I said, well, I've only been in your office for a year. I don't know what I'm doing. He says, trust me, you got this. So he went on vacation. I said, okay, I'm going to muddle through for 2 weeks. I was a nervous wreck. He came back and I said, oh, Dad, okay, good. I did this. I explained everything. And I said, okay, good. You can take it back. He says, no, I'm not taking it back. It's yours.
Oh, that's so and how old were you then?
I was
He was
24 years
yeah,
old.
we were about 24.
Wow, that was a whole lot of trust for a 24-year-old.
Yes, it
Oh,
was
yeah.
very nerve-wracking. My father had the insight to actually, as I was apprenticing with him, he actually made me set up a desk in his office. So literally we had 2 desks in his office, and I would mirror him every day. Heard all of his phone calls, everything, all the deals he made, all the contacts he had, all the contacts his father had. So it was really fun. So I spent a lot of time with him, and I'll cherish those moments forever.
Well, it's my guess, Annie, that this is kind of a male business that you got put into.
You know, Poppy, it's funny you say that because if you would have asked me 25 years ago if I'd be in the meat business, not a chance. Not a chance. When I finished school, my father told me I had a month to find a job. Well, I didn't find a job. He found me a job. I was the receptionist at NATCO real quick. And then I just moved up. I did a great job as a receptionist. I went into customer service and did very well, sold a lot of product over the phones. And I remember Nick Ascani, our manager, my father walked him into the conference room, and Nick goes, I want to put her in outside sales. And my father said, absolutely not. She's going to starve. She's a female. She cannot go out in the field. We have salesmen. Well, I sold $1 million the first year I was out in sales. And I think there's a part of me that I really feel like my father did that to me on purpose, to really push me. And I just continued to grow and then went into management and just meat just became a passion for me. I mean, women would look at fur coats like I look at a fillet. You know, I enjoyed this industry. And my dad he finally believed in me. I should say that. But I enjoy what I do, and I feel like I work with 3 of my best friends every day.
From where you all sit now, of course, you're having a pretty big year this year because this is the 90th year that the family business has been around, right?
Yes.
And what is happening to celebrate this?
On April the 11th, we are being inducted into the SoFAB Museum, and we're really honoring my father. 90 years in business. We have a lot of our family coming in from out of town. We're celebrating that evening with clients and friends at the SoFAB Museum because this is big. 90 years. People don't make it 90 years in business. Being third generation, and by the way, still talking to one another.
Oh, yeah.
And your family.
Yeah.
That's big.
Looking forward, what does the future of NATCO look like, do you all believe?
The future for NATCO is to continue to reach out on a further or a broader geographical zone. We are servicing some clients in Nashville currently, and we're in Mississippi right now. But as we grow and our kind of message gets out that we are concerned about restaurateurs and we want to help them make their restaurant profitable, consistent. We all know the stats of restaurants. They open up and they close. So Ann and I, we have a challenge to try to keep as many restaurants open and profitable. And we know that we can do our part by giving them the best beef at a fair price.
Ann Babin and John Lala of NATCO Food Services. You're not eating Southern style if a buttery pool of grits isn't on your plate. What exactly are grits? And what's the best way to cook them? Stay tuned, and we'll answer those questions when we come right back.
No sweeter lips has ever been kissed. No, they haven't. I wanna say no greater love.
I'm Poppy Tooker, and you're listening to Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Louisiana Eats is made possible with major support from Rouse's Markets. Here's this week's culinary quiz question, brought to you with support from Popeye's Louisiana Culinary Institute. What exactly are grits, and what's the best way to cook them? Nothing delineates the Mason-Dixon line, separating the North from the South like grits. Grits are ground, dried corn kernels. Sometimes they're finely ground, but in recent times, there's been a resurgence in the popularity of old-fashioned, coarsely ground grits. Although instant grits dominate the market because of their short cooking time, there's nothing like grits cooked the old-fashioned way. To cook grits, it takes 5 or 6 parts liquid to 1 part grits. I like to use half water and half milk to make mine. Bring the liquids to a boil in a heavy saucepan and season with salt, about 1/4 teaspoon for each cup of liquid. Whisk in the grits, making sure there's no lumps, and then cover the pot and reduce the heat to a simmer. Every 3 or 4 minutes, lift the lid and stir the pot to make sure nothing's sticking. Your grits will be soft and creamy in about 20 to 25 minutes. Once they're cooked, add copious amounts of butter and, if you like, stir in some grated cheese. The wickedest grits on earth are the ones my friend Chef Frank Brightston cooks. Frank adds heavy cream to his grits, which makes them, frankly, heavenly. I'm Poppy Tooker, and no matter how you serve them, grits are real Louisiana Eats. As we were leaving our new home, I noticed one last thing that I just had to ask Liz about. One of the things you have at the museum is the Leah Chase Gallery. So you and I both know and love our darling friend Leah. Tell us about what we find here in the Leah Chase Gallery.
Well, it was important to her when we named this gallery after her that she tell us the entire story. So we have this pink chef's jacket that belonged to Leah Chase, and she tells the story of why she wore a pink jacket, because she said she was not a chef. She didn't want to wear a white jacket, and she was only a cook, but she's quite a cook.
She's quite a cook.
So one of the things that was very important is to have a copy of the National Culinary Review which she was the first African American woman to be on the cover of that review.
Wow.
And also this little white pot.
Now,
And
this is a darling little white. I've never seen a pot quite like that. I would say maybe 3 quarts. It's white enamelware with a black wooden handle. It looks like a little sauce pot. What is it?
so this was the kind of pot that you would bring if you were an African American person in the Jim Crow South that could not go to a restaurant, and you would have a little pot like that would be your lunch pail. And so you would be able to go to a place like Dookie Chase and bring your pail, because this was before regular takeout, and they would put gumbo and rice in there, or red beans and rice in there, or something like that for you to take.
We actually had talked with Leah about a dish that would have gone into this lunch pail.
Gumbo Zerb is a green gumbo. You know, you have to use uneven numbers of greens because, you know, I don't know who's the superstitious ones. Is it the Creoles de Curler, or who is it that's superstitious? We can't have even numbers. That's bad luck. So you get greens, and you have either 5, 7, 9, or 11 different kinds of greens. You have to clean them and wash them and boil them and grind them and all that kind of thing to make gumbo zerb. But we do that on Holy Thursday. You see, you know, this town was predominantly Catholic, and that was the last meat day for Catholics. So you put all kinds of meat in that gumbo zerb. Stew, you put sausage, you put ham, you put chicken, all the works in that gumbo zerb. So you had a good hearty meal. And that's the only thing you ate, with some fried chicken on Holy Thursday.
So tell us what the greens are that go into your gumbo zerbs.
Well, you have a choice of different greens. We use collard greens, mustard greens, kale, cabbage, Swiss chard. I love to put beet tops in it. You put the beet tops in it. That gives it a good flavor. And you can put some lettuce in it. But the thing, the Creoles, they used to go in the neutral ground, you know, our neutral grounds, and they would dig pepper grass. You would see them out there with the little brown bags getting their pepper grass. And they would wash it off and clean it and put that in your gumbo zerb. That gave it a little lemony taste, but it gave a different kind of flavor. Now that we can't find the pepper grass, I use watercress. But sometimes if you go to the country, or Mississippi, they may have it, and we use the pepper grass in there. But that takes some doing to do that gumbo zerb. You have to grind it. I don't like it chopped, I like it grind. So you'll have a smooth dish, you know. It's like a puree. One customer said, it looks like algae, but it tastes good.
So when Dookie Chase first started, before even Leah Chase was working there, it was a bar that served lunch, and there would be a sandwich or whatever that was available, or maybe a hot plate. And so this would be where you would get your food, and because you wouldn't be able to be served at other kinds of restaurants.
The struggle against segregation was a turbulent time in New Orleans, as it was in the rest of the country, and Dr. Rudy Lombard and Dookie Chase Restaurant were on the front lines of that struggle. Now, take us back to those days of the lunch counter sit-ins. What propelled you into action?
I think for me, my mother cooked for one of the wealthy families in New Orleans. It was the John Stewart family. They lived on the corner of Dryads and Napoleon, across the street from one of the better-known restaurants, Manali's. And when I was a kid, I used to accompany my mother to work. But I was curious as hell about what went on at Manali's. And sort of resolved that one of these days I was going to go in that restaurant. And I knew then as a kid that blacks were not allowed to go.
What was Lombard versus Louisiana, and how did that turn out?
Well, the Lombard case came out of a sit-in we did at McCrory's. Myself, Oretha Haley, Lanny Goldfinch, and Cecil Carter. That was the second week of some sit-ins we were doing on Canal Street. They accused us of criminal trespassing and so forth and so on. And the case went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And my name got attached to the case that involved the other students and myself. There were 5 cases that were heard at the same time. And the ruling was that it was unconstitutional to discriminate against people on the basis of race in a place of public accommodation. So it made it possible for blacks and whites to go to the same places, restaurant, hotels, whatever.
So what happened? What happened when you all went in and took
Well,
the
they
seats?
asked us to leave, and when we refused, they arrested us. What the difference in the situation that we participated in was that the mayor insisted that blacks not be served in those places of public. And as a result, ultimately, the United States Supreme Court said, well, this wasn't an issue of private property, because if the mayor insisted that the local codes be enforced, which were not on the books so much, but it was the tradition of not serving blacks and whites in places of public accommodation. The fact that he insisted on us being arrested and being denied service made it a case that took it out of the realm of, say, private property and made it a public action. So his involvement made it such that the court ruled this was not an issue of public accommodation, but state action in effect.
Well, one place where I know that you were always welcome was at Dookie Chase Restaurant.
Absolutely.
And I have heard tell of many tales of the infamous upstairs room at Dookie Chase Restaurant. And could you tell me what was going on up there?
Well, when the Civil Rights Movement came along, the whites who participated in the Civil Rights Movement would go to Dookie Chase and enjoy a meal along with the blacks. And the police never bothered us at Dookie's. So we always knew that Dookie would be a refuge for whatever it is we were involved in. And we got the support of the Chase family to do that.
Now, Leah tells me, a lot of people don't seem to remember that it was just as illegal for white people to eat in black restaurants as it was for black people to eat in white restaurants. And
absolutely.
And yet somehow Dookie Chase was the place where everybody came together to find that common working ground that we moved forward on. Could you tell me about that?
Well, I can tell you it was true, and I can tell you it was illegal. But I think a lot of white politicians ate in private parties at Dookie Chase. So she knew a lot of them. And they could never do it in public with a group of black men and women. Blacks and whites were always welcome at Dookie Chase, no matter how radical it was perceived by the general public and the politicians and the civil authority of the city and the state and so forth. It didn't matter to them. They were stand-up kind of people. Now, there also was a woman working at Dookie's by the name of Virgie Castle, and she did the same thing. She had blacks and whites who came to her house to eat, and in many cases to stay there if we couldn't find a place for them to live while they were involved with the Freedom Rides or anything else we did. So between the Castles, Leah and her family, that was our sanctuary.
Coming to you from the Leah Chase Gallery in the Southern Food and Beverage Museum. That's it for this week's edition of Louisiana Eats, edible content for Louisiana food lovers. Join us next week when we take a look at the state of Gulf seafood 5 years after the BP oil spill.
Personally, I don't want to see the oyster industry go away. I don't think anybody wants to. It's just going to have to adapt as it has in the past.
Subscribe to our podcast, hear today's show, or catch up on previous editions anytime online at itsneworleans.com. Louisiana Eats is made possible with major support from Popeye's Louisiana Kitchen, Rouse's Markets, and Zatarain's. Additional support for Louisiana Eats is provided by Bacardi USA and Dickie Brennan and Company. Our media sponsor is Louisiana Life Magazine, the magazine of a great state. Original theme music by Johnny Sketch and the Dirty Notes. Big thanks to producer Chris Kehoe and associate producers Joe Schreiner and Sarah Holtz. come visit us anytime in our Louisiana Eats studios at the Southern Food and Beverage Museum. I'm Poppy Tooker. Louisiana Eats is a production of WWNO and the University of New Orleans.